Well, one of the things that was fortunate, I mean, when I first went on the show, they had this gramophone there, and they played this music. And I believe Quentin's theme had been used once before, and I don't know whose idea it was to bring it back, or, I mean, it maybe had been used in a different context or something, anyway. But they brought this da 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 dee, 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 and they would play it whenever Quentin, you know, came onto the show. So after a while, that began to have, you know, people identified, obviously, the character with the music. And as the show went on, then somebody came up with the idea of writing, the song was such a, you know, was fairly popular, and they decided to write words to it, Shadows of the Night. And then the song began, people began recording it. I believe Franny and Teicher, I think Andy Williams may have recorded it. There were various recordings of it, and it did quite well. And lo and behold, it was, Bob Hope had his theme song, and David Selby had his. I mean, I thought it was so, you know, in looking back on it, it was so special, because for a while, wherever I would go, people would get a great treat. In fact, today, I mean, I'll go somewhere and someone will bring out an old record and it'll be playing when I go in the house or something, and they're very proud that they've found this, wanted to play it. But for the longest time, you know, wherever I would go, people would always bring it up. I would hear it in elevators, you know, and I remember being in Canada or somewhere and hearing it, you know, in a hotel elevator years afterwards. It just brought back a wave. It just washes over you, you know, all of the memories of that particular time. But how delightful and how fortunate that an actor would have a theme song. It just, you know, I had the sheet music, and then we recorded that. I got a chance to record the thing for Phillips, I believe, and we did the LP, and I did the recitation of the words, Shadows of the Night, on the LP, and that was, again, quite special. And, I loved all of that. You know, again, you think, oh my God, it's all those things you don't expect. Who's to say, you know, when you go up and move a couple of golf balls on Dan's office and you do a scene from Summer and Smoke and he looks at you on camera, how are you going to know that later you're going to get 5,000 letters a week and they're going to send you a ton of Sara Lee cakes, you're going to have peace beads, you're going to have thousands of fans, you're going to have your own, very own theme song. Pretty lucky fella. Well, I think the appeal of Dark Shadows, people love a good story. People have been in love with Bram Stoker's Dracula. Oh, they love classics like Turn of the Screw or whatever. Dan, for all whatever reasons, was able to come up with a series of characters that, for whatever reason, translated to a lot of people on the other side of the tube. And that made all the difference. I think to a certain extent, the characters were so distinctive that sometimes they carried the storyline. Whether it was Carolyn or whatever, you know, when she played the vamp in The Blue Whale or whatever. Certainly Hoffman, Humbert Estrada's, Humbert's character, Jerry Lacey's Trask, Thayer David. I loved Thayer David. My God, did I love Thayer David. All of these distinctive, and probably going right from the beginning, before Quentin appeared on the show, so that combined with all the elements anyway that makes for a good Stephen King novel. Dark Shadows had the mystery, had the vampire, the sensual, sexual vampire. People loved those stories. And I think the combination of the fact that we had a sort of mini repertory company that, I don't know, the fans just tuned into these characters. And I think the appeal, maybe the appeal also had to do with that particular time, but I don't, because I think it's doing the right thing. It could be very film-wise. It could have great success today, and it continues to. That's what's amazing. Those shows had such an immediacy to them, whether, as I say, in the fact that you were driven by fear or whatever. The shows have a certain kind of energy, and obviously sometimes there's a certain camp to the shows. People could look at them from all various kinds of directions or ways, but the appeal lies in this special world that Dan's imagination created, and the writers fulfilled, and the actors carried out. And they were successful in creating a world of its own, so that world today is still of its own, just as it was then. Dark Shadows is no more dated, in a way, today than it was when we did it. I now believe that the show has a certain kind of eternity to it. It will go on because of how it's of its own world. Nothing comes into it. We don't see cars. We don't see, modern life. We never saw early computers on this show. We didn't have those kinds of things. There was no technology, even technology of the time. So I think to a certain extent it was very much of its own world, and was accessible enough that people could come into that world, and so much so that they could role play. They could be those characters in there.